Welcome back to the Python tutorial series. I'm so glad you're here. This is the 10th video in this series, and today we will be talking about lists and list operations. Then we will learn about list inside lists. Finally, we will learn about arrays and the difference between list and arrays. The timestamps are in the description below. So let's get started. We're going to start by creating a list that we call numbers. We're going to put a list of numbers in here. We can then print the list just like we would print a variable. And when we print this, it will output the list 3, 4, 7, 11, and 3. We can also print a specific element of the numbers list. And we do this by doing open close bracket and the index what we want. So the first index is actually 4, not 3, because 3 has an index of 0, 4 is 1, 7 is 2, and so forth. So when we print this, we should get 4. And we do. We can also print the third element if we wanted to, and that is 11. Imagine we had a long list. We would have to count a long time to reach the last element of the list, but there's an easier way to do it. By putting -1, and -1 will output the last element of the list, which is 3. We could also change an index. For example, if we wanted to change the number 4 to 2, we could do numbers 1 equals 2. And then when we will print the list, it will output 3, 2, 7, 11, and 3. We can also delete a certain index. For example, if we wanted to delete the 2, we could delete the first element. Then when we print this, it will delete that, so we have 3, 7, 11, and 3. We could also set the first value, numbers 1, to numbers 2, for example, and it will change it accordingly, so we get 3, 11, 11, 3. We can also see how long the list is by printing the length of the numbers, and when we do this and run the program, we will get 4, because that's how long the list is. We can also add numbers onto the end of the list by doing numbers.append. So if we wanted to add the number 17 to the end of the list, we could. And then let's print numbers so we can see it. Then when we add that to the code, it will add 17 to the end of the list. We could also insert a number in the middle of the list by doing numbers.insert. And then we need two values, where we want to insert it to the second index, and the value we want, 5. So when we print numbers, it would add 5 to the middle of the list, to the second position. We could also sort the elements in the list from smallest to largest by doing numbers.sort and then open and close parentheses. So when we print that out to the console, we should get them sorted, and in fact we do. 3, 3, 5, 11, 11, 17. And there you have it. That's a basic introduction to lists. Now let's talk about list operations. I created a list. Now let's create another list and set it equal to list 1, and the elements 0 all the way to the last element, but not including the last element. 0 all the way to -1, which is the end, but not including -1. So when we print list 1 and list 2, it should output them, and list 2 is everything up until but not including the last index, which is 3. So if we wanted to include every index from list 1 to list 2, we could do list 2 equals list 1, then nothing before the colon and nothing after the colon. That means from the start all the way till the end. Then when we print list 1, list 2, it will print the entire list. We could also append something onto list 2 by doing list2.append. Then we can append the element 33. And one thing to note is that these two lists are still unique. So when we print this, they're still operating independently. However, if you do list 2 equals list 1 and don't specify the index, it makes both lists the exact same. So when I run this, the two lists will be the same. Then if I wanted to append something just to list 2, I couldn't. It would append to list 2 and list 1 because they are the same now. So if I wanted to append 27 to list 2 and then print this out, it would add 27 to both lists because in line 8 we made them the same. And that's a brief introduction to list operations. Now let's talk about lists and lists. You may be thinking, isn't that an array? But in fact, it isn't. Many people confuse these two. So let's talk about lists and lists first. I created a list and a list here. John Smith, who's 16 and is in 11th grade. Bob Carson, who's 17 and 12th grade. And Jack Jones, who's 14 and in 9th grade. So this is one giant list, and then I have list with inside the list. So I have 3 lists inside this one long list. One nice thing about lists is your variables don't all have to be the same type. For example, we have both strings and integers. So if I wanted to print Bob Carson, who's 17 and 12, I could print it just like before. Print people 1. And then when I print this, it will print Bob Carson 1712. But let's say I just wanted to print that Bob Carson was 17. I could do print people 1, 2. So what this does, it grabs Bob Carson, who's 17 and is in 12th grade. Then once it knows it's in that list, it goes to the second element in that list, which is 17, and prints 17. And there you have it. That's an overview of lists and lists. So now let's talk about arrays. You don't need to know arrays specifically for the PSEP certification exam, but I think it's good to talk about here since we're talking about lists, so you don't get confused. If you remember from an earlier tutorial, we talked about import statements. In order to make an array, you must import the module array. And then I can create a variable, numbers, and set it equal to array.array. And what makes an array different from a list is that every element needs to be the same type. For example, I'm going to do integers here. And then I'll just do a list of integers here. So the I means that it's an integer. There are many different types. You can find an entire list on the web. Once I create an array, I can form many of the exact same operations that I would to a list. For example, if we wanted to have a for loop, we could, and we could do for every number in numbers, print the number, and this will work exactly like a list, and it will output 6, 7, 4, and 2. We can also print the entire list by doing print numbers. And when we print this array, you will be able to see that it is not a list, it's an array. Because it says array and it says the type integer here, then it has the array. So that's what an array is. And now you know the difference between arrays and lists. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to follow along with this video series by subscribing and hitting the notification bell, or by clicking on the next video so that you can expand your knowledge about Python. And as always, I can't wait to see you next time.